Hey, my friends, I gave you a challenging homework assignment, and I want to give you just a little more context to it. Your homework is that if there's a story in your life that you're afraid to tell, it's the story that you must tell. Because as much as we think that the story in our life, we can just bury it, burying something is the same process as planting something. Whatever you plant will grow. And it seems to just follow us in our life and grow and just entangle our life. This homework assignment, I think, is one of the most important assignments a human being will ever do. I want to recap very briefly. So, we're born, we're excited for a while. What are we excited about? We're excited about things like purpose, impact, joy, love, meaning. Something comes along our journey and it rewires us. When something goes wrong, the instinct we have to save ourselves or protect ourselves is what sends us into this whole different type of existence. When we make this move, this is me saving me. It's what it feels like. But actually, this move into the bush is what ruins me. Once I'm in the bush, I live a very different life and I end up in some kind of coping. Why am I coping? I'm coping because I'm not living the life I was made to live. I'm living this alternate existence. So, what we tend to do as humans is we say, okay, this coping causes all kinds of problems. I need to change that to get back over here to this path and be this bold person I was made to be. Humans can't do that. That's not how freedom happens. It sounds right. If I change this bad behavior, then I'll get back to being who I was meant to be. I'm going to show you what this assignment does that I gave you to tell your story. The step to freedom is not going from the coping behaviors all the way over to the path. I want you to show you the simple step to freedom. It's this right here. You go from the bush to not being in the bush. You say, well, that's too simple. It is simple. But think about this. How powerful was the movement from the path to the bush? How powerful was that? Everything in our being sends us from the bad events of life into the bush. We didn't have to contemplate it. It's just, it was instinctual. Something goes wrong. Oh my goodness, I must protect myself. I must save myself. So everything in the fiber of our being sends us into the bush. Consider this. This simple step that I'm proposing to come out of the bush, to come out of hiding, how hard is it to do the opposite thing that's incredibly instinctual to your being? How hard is that to do? It is very hard. It is very hard. I was 47 years old before I came out of the bush and just admitted my problem with food. Is it more difficult to come out of the bush with other things that have happened? I would think so. But it's the path of freedom. The reality is, everyone has had things go wrong in life. Everyone has experienced this number three thing we've talked about. Does it really matter how big or small it is? You and I, we both know people that have had small things happen to them, yet they live in a bush because of it. We also know people that have had really traumatic things happen to them, but they don't live in a bush. You and I know people that have had traumatic things happen to them and they live with their cape on. So we can too. But this step of freedom, I know it looks so simple, but it's hard because it's the opposite of our human instinct. If I went into the bush to protect me, coming out of the bush feels like I'm not protecting me. If I went into the bush to save myself, coming out of the bush looks like I am losing myself. Now that's interesting. There's a great principle within Scripture that says if you want to find your life, you have to lose it. Inside of the bush, human beings try to figure out our life, fix our life, make it be right, and then we'll come out of the bush. But we can't. In the bush, it leads to all the behaviors that undermine our life. It's simply coming out of the bush with the mess that we are. We have no answers. We have no fix. We just come out of the bush and say, here I am. Here's what I did. Here's what happened to me. Here's my story. I'm not going to hide it anymore. I am not going to hide my story anymore. There's something about this assignment of just telling the story that we're afraid to tell that transforms our life. What happens when a human stops hiding? They can start living. I want to clarify things really quickly. This homework assignment, it's not about changing what happened. We can't undo number 3. We don't have to. It's not about undoing that. It's not going back and studying that thing. It's about changing our perspective on what happened. And that can look like a lot of different things to people. It might just be the perspective of, oh, I can see why that person was broken at that time in their life and why they did that to me. We might look back and say, I can see how I was broken at that time in my life, and that's why I did that thing. Thirdly, it's about changing our response to what happened. My friend, number 3 happens to everybody. What crushes us is not the fact that number 3 happened. What crushes the human is our response to number 3 happening. Number 3 happens to everyone, but it doesn't have to define our life and legacy, our future, our relationships. It was our response that was the problem, not the thing itself. So that's really important, is to understand, wait, it was my response that caused me to end up in this bush. I didn't have to live in the bush, in this alternate existence, because that thing happened. It's what I did instinctually. I thought it was going to help me. I thought it was going to protect me. I didn't know it was going to barricade me away from my dreams. And this is good news to realize this. It means number 3 doesn't get to have the ability to determine the rest of our life. And lastly, it's about changing our perspective toward ourselves. You see, when number 3 happens, someone said recently, it rewires us. It makes us look at ourselves differently. And in the bush, it's really easy to have the awkward perspectives on ourselves and to see ourselves in such a different way. I'm just so compelled by this assignment because although it's so counter our instincts to be able to just tell our story, the story that we're afraid to tell, it enables us to see ourselves differently. I want to encourage you. I don't recommend you talk to a family member unless it's someone who is really seasoned, someone you know you can really trust, someone who has been to the bush and made their way out of the bush. You could probably talk to that person, but probably not a family member, just because it's hard for them to carry the weight sometimes. It doesn't have to be a professional counselor or therapist, although it can be. I recommend a mentor type of person. Someone who understands what it is to be broken and what it is to be free. If you don't have anyone in your life to tell that to, my wife and I are listening ears for a lot of people all the time. And if you don't have anyone to trust, you can reach out to me. We can set up a conversation and we can have that. I already know what I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to ask you deep, dark questions about what happened. I'm going to point you towards your purpose. So I just wanted to shoot this video to give you some encouragement and some perspective. I know this is a hard assignment, but what if you only have to do it one time, just once? You don't need to tell the world your story. Just don't hide your story. Tell one person, one time. Have a good day.